So the first question I wanted to open with, similarly to the author panel, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what's exciting you at this moment in the conversations around the science of reading, as well as the overarching literacy landscape. What's exciting you, as well as what makes you apprehensive? And I know Melissa is coming in, so come on in. The question as you trickle up is, what excites you about the moment that we are all living through in the nation's literacy landscape? And what makes you apprehensive?
Well, I'm always excited about literacy, even when it's depressing, or the times are depressing. I think what's very exciting is that there is more talk about the science and the research. And of course, the minute people start talking about it in a lot, I guess, in breadth and in depth, then you have to really reinterpret the research to practice, because you're talking about two different silos of people. You're talking about people who are doing the research, hopefully well, and then you're talking about what Joanna Uri at Fordham used to talk about, the messy world of classrooms, and that it is really very difficult to interpret research in a day-to-day, minute-by-minute way by human beings, teachers. And so the exciting part is that people are starting to understand that there has to be this sort of interpretation that is real, that you could actually do. You know, like if somebody tells you how to wash your windows, you know, based on some research, they still have to figure out how you open the window, pull it out, wash it. So that to me is the exciting part. The scary part, I guess, or I don't know what word you used, Melissa, the scary part to me is that, you know, you get to be a certain age and you realize that you have been through so many pendulum shifts. And the scary part is that at every pendulum shift, it goes like all the way. And then it cannot survive in that all the way environment. So then it swings back, but there's no gravity to keep it kind of in the middle. And I'm using this word very selectively, in a truly balanced way. Because that was the intention when the term balanced literacy, which is now verboten, don't use it. But, you know, when the term balanced literacy, it was a reaction to a pendulum swing then. So I worry about, like, where is it going?
I'm sure. I have two microphones here. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything that you said, Esther, you know, and I think that, I think what, you know, there is so much knowledge that we have about what works in terms of reading. And I think a lot of times what the challenge is systems and logistics and really schedules. It's like the schedule is like the most impossible tool for anyone who's trying to carry out this work in an actual school. And so I think, you know, involving building administrators in the conversation is really, really critical. And I think that's starting to happen. But I think there still are some thoughts about how, you know, teachers or specialists know best and building administrators sort of stay out of it. But I don't know how you accomplish the work of bringing high quality literacy practices on all sides of the reading rope in a meaningful way, unless you really bring building administrators into the conversation. And so I think that that's something I'm thinking about a lot.
I have two. Is this working? So I kind of agree with Esther. I was going to say the same thing. When I first started teaching, I remember my first week, we were piloting a new ELA program. And I went next door to my mentor. She was a teacher of 40 something years. And I remember, and she said to me, I said, I'm so excited about this pilot. And she says, yeah, I've seen that. She's like, it's just, you know, the pendulum goes, yeah. And she said, now come with me, go get a 403B open with me in the cafeteria. So those were her two lines to me. But I'm excited because I see it swinging back to kind of what it was when I first started teaching, what old thematic units, but I see it a lot more scientific and a lot more supported and a lot more of the direct, explicit instructional part of it being added to it, which kind of which is what was missing from the thematic unit idea. But seeing the learner more as the whole is what is exciting me.
I don't know if I'm supposed to interject, but so I will. I'm excited that many voices are coming to the table in terms of literacy. People are really starting to understand that literacy impacts a child's mental health, physical health, financial prosperity, all of those things. And so we're starting to see conversations at the state legislature level for the American Academy of Pediatrics is getting involved. So that excites me. I'm also a bit apprehensive about having the patience and the stamina to do the work. We want quick fixes, and it's going to take a long time. So I worry that we're going to forget that that change is hard in many cases. Another misconception that I often hear about the science of reading is that it's just for those kids K-2. I think there's a real lack of understanding about what the science of reading looks like, particularly at the middle school and secondary level. So I'm hoping you can help explain what that looks like and what it boils down to for those of us who are working with secondary students.
So I would say that, the science of reading in upper education, the upper grades, I think it certainly involves some of the pieces that we talked about today in terms of the different aspects of word knowledge, like morphology. Like, I think that there aren't many big multisyllabic words that don't have either a prefix or a suffix attached to them. And so I think working with students to make sure they have that ability, not only to read the word accurately, but to also have the understanding of how those prefixes and suffixes change the meaning of the words and what the power and roots and what the power of that is. So I think morphology, is very 2026. I think phonology has had its day. No, phonology is still important, but I think morphology is going to be where it's at. But I think when we talk about the science of reading in upper grades, I think we're also talking about the science of writing and how reading and writing are so tied together. And if you think reading is complicated, writing is like 20 times more complicated. And yet there's so little, high quality explicit instruction in writing. There's in terms of information and conferences, like I think we're just at the tip of really breaking into that. And, they've done a lot of work on it. At Vanderbilt, Catherine Harris and Steve Vaughn, and there are programs that exist, but I think they just are not as in the forefront right now. So.
What she said, no, no, I agree with writing. Definitely, I see it more in writing, and like you said, and there is a huge gap in the science of reading, and then there's writing, and there's all these different programs that they're trying to develop to kind of help like marry with it in a sense. So I totally agree with that, and also with vocabulary and morphology, definitely.
I think it's a really interesting question, and so it makes me think of David Kilpatrick. If you've ever heard him, he's a fabulous speaker. You have to listen really fast because he talks so fast. But David Kilpatrick talks about the science, and sometimes if I'm in a very confrontative mood and somebody talks to me about the science, like which science are you talking? Because as David points out, there are of the really good high quality, I hate to use that term, but peer reviewed, highly respected journals. He shows this series of slides, like the first one, that science that normal people might read, who actually go out for wine after work sometime or go home and cook dinner for their family. And then he talks about the more esoteric, and he goes on, and he doesn't cover all the journals, but like something like 300 journals. He's only talking about literacy, specifically about reading. And so when we talk about science, we're not always clear, including myself, because there's so much. And usually you mean a little portion of it, because that's what you talk about when you talk about science, is the portion that applies to the little slice. So I think that part of what is happening in this whole movement to the science of reading is that the human brain cannot cover K to adult literacy. So we took a little slice and we started out with that missing piece, the bottom 3 pillars. And mostly that applied for typically developing kids to K to 2. So now we're doing that. We're not done. We're not done, anywhere near done. But then you start to look at, again, let's talk about typically developing kids. And then you have to move, even in K to 2, into areas that we have not yet covered, including writing, morphology, higher level stuff. So I feel like that is the next, it's the 20, I love that term, the 2026, and then 30 and 40,
So one of the terms that keeps popping up in conversations about the science of reading is HQIM, high quality instructional materials. What does that mean to you, and what should the considerations around high quality instructional materials be?
Okay. So my colleagues and I were just having this conversation actually yesterday, and I think maybe we looped in Molly last night. I can't remember, but I think we said when a curriculum is developed by publishers, it doesn't always fit with the schedule of a particular school or the constraints of a particular school. And I think that anytime you have a high quality instructional material in front of you, you still need to curriculum map it. You still need to decide what are our have-tos in our district or in our school. What do we definitely want to get through over the course of the year? Because some publishers will even acknowledge, oh yeah, nobody gets to the last module of our curriculum. We've packed way too much in, because they're trying to cast a very broad net. They want this to meet all of the standards in every state across the country. And so they've put a lot in there. And I think they are almost expecting that educators and administrators and district curriculum coordinators will sort of pick and choose what they think is most essential. But I think we've been so fearful now about doing things without fidelity. And then if we're not following, lock and step, that we're somehow going to miss the mark. And it's going to be our fault that we've shied away from really being thoughtful about how do you make high quality instructional materials work for you, work for your district? What are the high leverage practices that you definitely want to include, but where do you want to have some wiggle room? Where can you afford some choice? Is that done by a committee? Is that done at the district level? I think that those are conversations that are maybe not happening as much. And I think it's leading to a lot of frustration with trying to implement with fidelity.
Yeah, so as I mentioned just a minute ago, so the term high quality for anything, it does drive me a little crazy, because it can't be interpreted mathematically. It's very subjective. If you do ask me for advice on high quality slipcover fabric, it's still subjective, but I think I could do a pretty good job. High quality, when materials are poor quality, it's much more evident. High quality, and I think right now, just the educational publishing industry is so huge that they are cranking out some pretty good, I don't want to use the high quality term, but good material, usually too much of it for any human to deliver, but choice is good. So I do agree very much with Melissa that high quality, if you want to use that term, it really depends on the needs and the abilities of the people in the district, because you could have high quality curriculum, but if it requires so much training that the rollout itself is going to take 5 years, well, that's too late for the kids that would have gone from grades 1 through 5 in that time. So I feel like we really have to consider, obviously don't pick poor quality material. But the fact that it's rubrics and humans create the rubrics makes me a little uncomfortable. I'm hoping there become better and better ways to decide what is really good quality. Is it that the stories are wonderful, the text, and what is high quality literature? You know, I'm an avid reader. I read all different kinds of literature. I do know a bad book when I read it, but there's lots of good books and I don't really rank them. So I feel like it's a very murky area.
Yeah, I think one of the things for high quality that really sits with me most is, having been in the classroom for 27 years, is going to the teacher to ask them how it fits with them. I think a lot of good materials are being created. And I think, like you said, that there's an abundance of it. Like, and most publishers will tell you, or most, will tell you, you're not going to get through all 15 units this year. But really the people who have to do it are the teachers. And going into the classroom and letting the teachers decide what's important based on, obviously, what the district feels is important. But I really do, I come back to the teacher all the time. And what is the single greatest unit of change is the teacher.
So I think a few years ago, no one would have been able to look at a crystal ball and predict this moment in the literacy landscape. So we've touched on this a little bit, but where do you hope the literacy landscape goes in the next 3 to 5 years? What would you like to be forefront in people's minds and considerations? Where do you hope conversations go, looking through that crystal ball down the road?
I'll just say that was not in the email that you sent us.
I know, I
The
ad-libbed, I
questions ahead of time,
apologize.
Molly. So, okay. Let's see. So, well, one thing that we're thinking a lot about at Crafting Minds, my team and I, is how do we break down some of the silos that exist between different departments within a school district? And so we work in some communities where there are a very high percentage of newcomers, and we have lots of multilingual learners, and oftentimes they are pulled from their ELA instruction to receive language instruction. And it creates this really huge chasm that opens up between, the academic skills moving on and their ability to access the content. And so we've really worked to try to break down some of the silos so that the teachers, the ELL teachers or the language teachers have training in the ELA classroom curriculum, that we work with them to modify the classroom curriculum to deliver instruction that uses some of the structured literacy routines that you saw here today, but that they're differentiated for language learners so that they're very oral language forward. Rather than talking about sounds first, they're talking about meaning first. They're doing a lot of expressive language pieces. They're always trying to tie in the strategies, the visuals, everything that the students are seeing in their tier 1 instruction into any of the language instruction. Sometimes they're even pushing into the classroom. And that right now is a real novelty, and at least in the districts that we're working in, it's not something that the language teachers are necessarily trained in or comfortable with. And so I think that having kind of a framework that's much more integrative to begin with would be really valuable in moving forward the achievement of all students.
I mean, I think I really want to be on the forefront, and I'm excited about seeing the learner as a whole. And I see more of that coming in, and not just a number. Like, I remember for the last 10 years, it was this big accountability and numbers and everything. And I feel like now now that the science is being, and it's not new, but it's becoming more of discussion and more implemented, that we're starting to look at the child again as a whole, and their learning as a whole and as an individual. So I'm very excited about that, kind of like what I already touched on about things kind of shifting back toward thematic units, but with the support that should have been there from the beginning, and looking more at the science of learning, of how people learn and what children learn and what motivates them. And it's not so linear. I mean, there's a definite way of doing it. It's systematic, and but looking at a whole child, that excites me.
So I want to make sure that it's about what we're looking forward to, correct?
Or what
Correct?
you, if you had to predict what you think, where you think the future of the literacy landscape looks like.
So there's what I think in my pessimistic moments and then the hopes, of course, there's always the optimism. So I feel like we are at a crossroads because at every every one of those pendulum shifts, there's a moment of great promise for whatever people believe that shift to be. And I think everybody here believes that we're in a good shift. I certainly do. I think we're just at the beginning of it. We're just peeling the layers off. We're really not very deep in. I do think it takes like 5 to 10 years to really, for society, for parents, and for teachers, and in that order, in a way, probably simultaneously, to really understand what all of the chatter, because teachers get a huge amount of chatter, training. It is very hard to coordinate and align training that teachers get. You have to cover the class. You have to make sure that you hopefully sending 2 second grade teachers together so maybe they can talk about it. But I am optimistic that this could be done if it's approached in a very plain talking, logical way. So that's the part where, to me, it's a little murky and where I get a little pessimistic about it because it's easier to say that than to actually do it in the real world. But I am hoping that more and more that the layers open, that the 2 sides of the reading rope get addressed because the big focus right now is on the mechanical layer. Maybe we have to do that to really get that back. But not as much focus, not even just in secondary, but really in K to 12 on the literary focus, which is the ultimate goal of reading. And so, again, it's a question of keeping everything in balance, but I'm optimistic it can be done. What I want people to prove to me is that it will be done.
So the final question, which was pre-prepared. So there are lots of people who are not fortunate enough to be in the room today. What would you like the folks who are in this room to be able to turnkey and share with their colleagues about best practices in literacy? It's one takeaway you hope people are bringing back to their schools, classrooms, communities, libraries, et cetera.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll start. So I want you to bring back everything, even stuff that we haven't spoken about, just everything. So I think what's very, very critical that we sort of touched on today, we did touch on it, but we didn't, it's not the whole picture, is to really bring back the idea of the reading rope, and there are other illustrations, if you prefer a different one, little infographics, to really, if you're in a situation where that idea of teaching phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency are not embedded in the culture of your school, that it's very critical for you to gain allies in doing that and doing it well, which means you have to go out for PD, read, discuss, etc., to bringing that back. And then I also go to a lot of schools and speak to a lot of teachers where the other piece is missing, meaning the more of the knowledge building, the comprehension, the critical thinking, all of the things in the Common Core that have to do with literary analysis, etc. So meaning the top down and the bottom up stuff, and I believe you squeeze kids between those in a good way. And so I feel the message has to be that. And then how do you do it? Because my feeling is if somebody says, do this, I also want very much for people to very plainly explain, how do you do it in front of a class of 25 to 30 people, or if you're in doing small group instruction, even then, the how-to, which I feel sometimes people leave out for different reasons. So that'll be my goal.
I hope that you leave, feeling inspired by the power of written language, not only, in terms of the evolution of written language within our species and all of the great privileges it's afforded us as humans, but also just inspired and motivated to help a single person achieve, reading proficiency so that they can go beyond their own experience and delve into the stories and the books and all of the wonderful tales that the authors shared with us, and then to maybe be motivated to share their own story. I don't think it's not easy. There are only a very small percentage of children for whom reading is easy, and building the life of a reader is not easy in this day and age. There's so many other competing draws on our attention. And I think that it is sort of like training a muscle where you have to make time for it, both maybe in your schoolwork and in your home life with your families. But I think the payoff is extraordinary. And I feel excited to go home and throw away my kids' screens and and take away their televisions. They're going to be thrilled. Yeah.
I mean, I'd probably say, like Esther said, like leaving here with the knowledge and the knowledge base for it, and to do it. But also more like one of the things when I work with my graduate students is I really try to get them to understand, to have fun with it, to go in the classroom and have fun. That one day, if you make a mistake, what's the expression? Children learn in spite of us. Right. So to enjoy it, and you make mistakes. I made a mistake today and I'm okay with that at the end, but that's part of the learning process.
Well, thank you. It has been a real treat to listen to all of you with your wisdom and experience in the classroom and in research labs and in tutoring with students. So thank you for your time today. And seeing we are almost at the end of our time today, I want to encourage you, if you haven't seen the resources in the back of the room, all of us know Penguin Random House for the fabulous books that they put out and the authors that we had the privilege of hearing from. But there are also lots and lots of resources that are on their website in terms of position papers and writing and things to take back to your schools and classrooms. So I'll encourage you to take a look at those. A couple of us will stick around for further questions. If you need contact information for follow-up, please don't hesitate to reach out. And before I turn the microphone back to Michael, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for prioritizing today, for the work that you do in your schools, classrooms, libraries, publishing houses, communities, to help kids explore and discover the magic, the art, and the science that is learning to read and becoming lifelong, habitual, confident readers. So thank you for your time today. Michael.
And thank you, Molly, for an excellent job today. A round of applause for Molly. On behalf of PRH Education and DK Learning, we really want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope you're leaving energized with some clear takeaways and have a little bit of fun in the process, as was said. Like Molly mentioned, you have lots of materials on the back table. Please help yourself. We have a few sandwiches left outside. Take it for dinner, perhaps, if you want. And again, want to thank everyone. We will be sending an email after this event with links to all of the PowerPoint sessions, as well as a video recording. So for folks who couldn't be, colleagues of yours that couldn't be in the room today, please share the recordings with them. If our distributor friends can stick around, we're actually heading to a different room for the 3 o'clock product session. We'll be going out these doors as well. So just stick around, we'll bring you there. And just want to thank all of you for joining us today. So thank you. Have safe travels home.